World Economic Forum 2026 membuka tirai di Davos, Switzerland dengan tumpuan sudah pasti soal geoekonomi, geopolitik yang kian mencengkam dunia. Hari pertama di Davos, editor kanan Najib Arif sempat menembual pengarah urusan WEF Saadia Zahidi dalam memberi gambaran tumpuan pada WEF 2026.
Okey, sudah pun membuka tirai untuk World Economic Forum 2026 di Davos, Switzerland ini. Di belakang ini adalah tempat dialog itu bermula. Semangat dialog yang diangkat oleh pemimpin dunia, corporate, NGO dan sebagainya yang berkumpul di sini untuk membincangkan isu-isu yang mendesak. Sudah pasti kita melihat laporan yang dikeluarkan oleh World Economic Forum seperti Global Risk Report yang melihat kepada geoekonomi, geopolitik dan juga satu bentuk ancaman baharu dan juga tekanan baharu. Bagaimana ini melihat kepada kesan berantainya kepada aspek-aspek lain khususnya dalam soal kemanusiaan dan sebagainya dan juga pelaburan kita dalam soal modal insan. Itu yang saya bincangkan pada waktu ini. Saya bersama dengan Saadia Zahidi iaitu pengarah urusan untuk World Economic Forum. Saadia, thank you so much. It's a pleasure having you with us again for World Economic Forum 2026. Now this is a very crucial year and very important year. There's a lot of new development happening around the world. I want to start our conversation with the Global Risk Report produced by World Economic Forum itself. Of course, geoeconomic rivalries now as a top global risk. Resources are often pulled away from social investment in that sense. So how can governments and also businesses continue or even expand in terms of investment in people as economic nationalism grows at the same time?
So first, let me confirm that risk is a major issue that we're starting to see come up. So yes, geoeconomic confrontation at the top, the possibility of state-based armed conflicts are next. There continues to be concern around artificial intelligence and what that's going to do in the longer term. So with all of that, now is the moment where we have the greatest need for investment in human capital, and now is exactly the moment where governments, both advanced and emerging markets, are more indebted than they have been ever before and are having to spend more, in some cases, on defense, having to spend more and differently when it comes to localized investment. And what that means is, do we have enough focus on more social related programs, whether it's education or lifelong learning? So the risk is absolutely the right one. I think the second element, though, is a much more hopeful one, which is that exactly because of the rise of artificial intelligence and other technologies, one, we have more data than ever before on the skills that are needed and that are not needed anymore. We have more data than ever before on labor markets. We also have more tools than ever before on personalizing education, personalizing learning. So there is an opportunity at the same time to not just see, due to a lack of funds, a stepping away, but in fact, using those funds strategically combined with technology to actually put into the hands of people the skills they really need.
Yeah. Of course, one of the things we are looking at is the inequality, because you mentioned just now about AI advancements, especially in the global south countries, for instance, because their readiness in embracing AI and all that. So how do you see, because inequality remains one of the most interconnected risks globally. Of course, this fueling division and also at the same time eroding trust at the same time. But how do you see, based on your experience and your observation, which policies do you see work best in terms of tackling inequality at the age of AI?
So I think this is at the moment, a vicious cycle. The reason we see inequality being the most interconnected risk for the second year in a row is because all of this is feeding each other. So for example, because of geoeconomic confrontation, if you do have higher tariffs, that leads usually to higher prices of goods, which then again hits the pockets of those that are already barely making ends meet in some cases, and that then fuels inequality. Add to that societal polarization and you have this mix which is leading to even more rising economic nationalism, even if that goes against, in the end, the self-interests of those households. So that is the vicious cycle, and that is what requires a cutting off. And that means much more investment in ensuring that people have the human capital that they need to be able to navigate the AI economy. Second, much more support for entrepreneurs. Now, that is a topic that is too ignored at the moment, and we're going to be putting it back on the agenda here. What technology offers is an opportunity for people to be entrepreneurs, but it still requires a system to support them, whether that's a financial system, whether that is a system that improves the ease of doing business and removing the regulatory hurdles that might stand in people's way, helping people connect with global markets. All of that is still something that especially countries in the global south have to do. And we found from our latest chief economist's outlook that they have a lot of faith in the fact that in this new economically contested world that we are in, at the same time, there is a huge opportunity for emerging markets and the global south. So, for example, some of the areas where they're expecting the highest growth are South Asia, the Middle East.
Right.
There's great expectation around East Asia. So that's really where I think the focus has to be, combining that localized support with the global opportunities that exist between countries.
How do you see, or do you see that the world leaders, especially from global south, maybe are facing huge burdens or challenges, I would say, in tackling a lot of issues? First thing, they need to focus on the short-term risk, for instance, debt, inflation, social polarization in a sense. But when it comes to education and human capital investments, it's a long-term investment, so they would rather focus on the short-term first. But do you see that that's the case right now, and how can we change that?
You know, I think the risk pressures right now might actually change that calculation.
Right.
So, because artificial intelligence is moving so rapidly through labor markets, including to some extent in developing markets, even if overall they may not have the overall AI development infrastructure, they're still integrating AI into their business models, or they are losing roles and jobs and business process outsourcing because of that use of artificial intelligence in the global north. What that means is that there's a much higher pressure now. So if there was ever one moment where the biggest no-regret move for leaders everywhere, but particularly in developing and emerging markets, was to focus on human capital, this is the moment. This is where they have to do that.
No, as we mentioned just now, AI, the rapid advancement of AI. We are talking about the lifelong learning about for human capital in a lot of countries around the globe. But do you see that the practical approach for these countries, basically, to have the systems that is inclusive enough for a global south, for instance? This is something quite new for them in terms of having the right systems and all that. So I've been to Las Vegas for AWS reInvent. So we'll talk about a lot about AI and all that. So I've seen the huge gap between the advanced countries and also developing countries in terms of having their workforce and also their human capital being trained by AWS and all that. But you see that this is a huge gap. Can we tackle this, and what kind of policies that you see should be in place for the global south countries?
So I think there's a couple of different things here. So one is the access to information as to what works and what doesn't is now much more available than it ever has been in the past. In fact, one of the things that the forum does is bring together about 40 countries in a network of accelerators from various countries around the world, bringing them all together, including from Malaysia and Thailand and other places in East Asia as well, to try to learn from each other as to what works and what doesn't work when it comes to rapid human capital investments and getting rapid returns from that kind of skilling and social investment. That's one element. I think the second element is that there's the same tools that to some extent are creating the disruption are also the tools that we can actually use to be able to address some of that skilling, and that can be done quite privately. So it has become incredibly cheap to now be able to provide personalized learning and skilling to many people around the world, provided they have an internet connection. So I think that is still one major sticking point. This could work for those that have digital connectivity. It would not work for those that don't have digital connectivity. And then the third element is, I think we all need to be talking the same language around skills, right? So if we don't have the same language, then there is no way for us to be able to say when somebody is learning X or learning Y, if those are considered two completely different things and there is no movability of that certification between different companies in the same country or between countries, that also doesn't quite work. That's another effort that we're leading here, and where we'll have a meeting of our Reskilling Revolution champions. How do we start talking the same language?
I'll talk about the theme for World Economic Forum 2026, the spirit of dialogue, because when we talk about AI, when we talk about geoeconomy, geopolitics, there's a lot of dialogues happening before. It's either it's working or it's not working. But the spirit of dialogue, because at the same time, the World Economic Forum is also focusing on actions, not just dialogue. But how do you see that this platform, World Economic Forum 2026, is a very crucial platform to discuss this kind of topics and action being taken by the world leaders that's going to join World Economic Forum and also the corporate leaders as well?
So I think there's multiple reasons why we've chosen this as the theme. One is this is a very contested environment, right?
Yes.
So the Global Risk Report having 18% of its respondents telling us that geoeconomic confrontation is one of their biggest risks, or 30% of them overall talking about geoeconomics and geopolitics as the key risks. In such a world, simply bringing people together to be able to talk to each other, to build some informal trust, that is one of the key purposes of this meeting. A second element is the context has changed so much, right? So the world is constantly going through shifts at the best of times, but at this moment it feels that it is deeply accelerated with multiple types of risks and transformations all happening at the same time. So to understand the context, we need to be able to sit with each other and have the kind of gathering we're having here, where you have sometimes very different viewpoints, but they need to be brought together so that we can all start developing a more holistic view of the context. And then the third piece is, once you start to develop some trust, once you start to have the same understanding of what the current context is, that is when you can start building the coalitions of the willing and actually take them forward. And I think you'll see two pieces of that here in Davos. One is the set of work that we already started with our communities quite some time ago, whether that is on skills and jobs or whether that's on climate. Those issues and those communities are there, they're very strong, and they're going to be continuing their work. But the second is we might see new coalitions emerging as people start rebuilding trust with each other, and as people start thinking about this new context. Is there more that is needed on any one of these topics that is starting to emerge to the top? That's what we'll also be seeing here.
Do you see any changes from the past 3 years? Because we are talking about trust for the past at least 3 to 4 years. Talking about more unity and collaborations among countries and all that. And we've seen more fragmentation happening around the globe. We have President Donald Trump is going to join World Economic Forum this coming Wednesday. But how do you see the difference year to year after year in terms of having that not just dialogue and discussion, but the actions taken by all these world leaders and also corporate leaders?
I think the set of issues has tended to change very rapidly in the last few years. And so what the forum always tries to develop capacity for, and what I think we've tried to do at our annual meeting, is one, address the longer term challenges that just don't quite change as rapidly. So again, human capital, climate, these are issues that have existed for many years, and these are issues that we continue to do work on. But then there are other areas that require more rapid responses. So for example, the forum during the pandemic mobilized the COVID action platform to very quickly bring together the players in pharma, the players on global supply chains, the players in various governments, the players on the international organizations that needed to be involved, to actually mobilize people around taking action there, again, using a combination of formal and informal networks. So I think it's always both, depending on where the context heads. Some of the more perennial, long-standing issues that require long-term efforts. So for example, our efforts on climate and on jobs are at least 10-year initiatives, which each have very clear targets they're trying to meet. But then some of these other areas required rapid mobilization. And you'll see more of that happening here, in some cases behind the scenes, in some cases on stage, bringing people together around some of the geopolitical and geoeconomic front, having people debate where they think the new economy is headed, having people think through where they think the benefits of artificial intelligence need to be fully leveraged and where we need to manage some of the risks. So you'll see all of that happening here in Davos.
All right, my final questions. What you hope to see over the next 1 week at least, the discussion and dialogue that we're going to have? Of course, we have President Trump, we're going to have a Vice President of China and other world leaders as well. What is your hope for the World Economic Forum 2026?
So I think that we certainly hope that we will be hearing all viewpoints. The forum is a platform that engages and invites and builds relationships with many people. I hope that all of those who will follow our sessions online, and there's more than 250 sessions that are fully available to the public, will get a better understanding of the context and what is top of mind of leaders. And third, I hope and expect that we will have a lot of progress, both on issues behind the scenes, as well as some of the initiatives that have already planned specific areas of action. You'll see announcements from various countries who sign agreements here. You'll see announcements on specific topics where we expect to bring the business sector and the public sector together and make some very specific commitments that will be impacting the lives of people around the world.
All right, Saadia, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time. I'm pretty sure. Thank you so much for taking your busy schedule, and it's going to be very busy week for you and for me as well. Thank you so much, Saadia. We are discussing dan juga melihat pada isu ini bukan perkara baru, dan juga yang paling penting adalah apa yang kita boleh belajar, action yang seperti Saadia sebutkan tadi di peringkat negara. Kalau di Malaysia, bagaimana untuk kita melihat dasar-dasar kita yang bersesuaian dengan apa yang diperlukan untuk acuan kita. Dan pada masa sama, akhirnya cabaran ini bersifat global dan juga bukan eksklusif kepada sebuah negara sahaja. Itu antara yang boleh kami bawakan di World Economic Forum 2026. Banyak lagi temu bola lain yang kami akan bawakan dalam rancangan-rancangan yang kami sediakan. Dan anda boleh ikuti di laman web kami, astroawani.com.